birth of Clyde since the days of the colourful old square-rigged sailing ships. The Scottish sons of Greenock have ventured out to answer the call of the sea. For 3 centuries and more, her history has been written by ships and men.
In 1951, the Scottish shipbuilding town of Greenock welcomed an unexpected new arrival, American technology giant IBM.
You said IBM and immediately thought modernity.
There's something in the DNA of people in Inverclyde. They've got the, we will make this happen.
And it gave us a little moment of hope, but I think the future smelled Scottish.
For the next 6 decades, IBM operated a vast factory in Greenock's Spango Valley.
Oh, it was exciting. It was just another world.
It transformed everything.
Oh, we thought we were film stars.
Which turned out technologies that introduced the new computer age.
If you wanted a computer, it had to be IBM.
It wasn't that long ago. A computer took up the size of a whole room.
The Greenock plant made products which changed the world.
They said it was the largest research project outside developing the atomic bomb.
And hatched a plan to steal a place for Scottish manufacturing in the global personal computer revolution.
We can do this. We can do this cheaper. We can do it better.
Being on the start of the journey, it was really exciting.
IBM kick-started a Scottish electronics boom, which promised to carry us into a new high-tech world.
I think the story is one of the great untold stories of Scottish industry, to be honest.
I started working at IBM, still remember the date, September the 20th, 1982. I had studied computing at Paisley Tech. We used to have one machine to share between the 12 of us, and at that time, all we were doing was playing Space Invaders. Back in '82, you wanted to work for the biggest company in the world, and guess what? IBM gave me an offer, and it's one I couldn't refuse.
It was the rise of the computer age, and it was going towards the peak, and so you're on at the start of the wave, and you were riding that wave to the top.
In the 1950s, the American technology firm IBM opened a huge manufacturing plant in the Spango Valley, just outside the town of Greenock.
So here's the blue building coming up now. This is the start of the actual IBM site. Oh, it was massive, very, very big. You know what I mean? Sure, it was like a mile end to end. I mean, it used to take us about 20 minutes to walk. Now it's just derelict, right? There's nothing there.
IBM vacated the site in 2016, after more than 60 years. But at the height of its operation, thousands of people worked here. The 70-acre complex included vast manufacturing spaces called modules, a distribution centre, 2 office blocks, and even a social club.
I had worked in the shipyard before, so it was very, very different. For me, it was huge, and I thought, I'll never find my way around here.
So the mainframes at that time were taking up like massive rooms. It was absolutely state of the art.
Long. It's very, very long down the valley. There used to be a little bus that would drive you around the different buildings because the campus was so long.
Remember the car parks in IBM? 2,000 cars in the car park.
People would pass and say, I couldn't find IBM, but there's a big car plant up the road.
Yeah.
This group of retired IBMers all started work at the plant as teenagers in the 1950s.
You see, I always remember the word in the town was, it's a fly-by-night company.
I know that.
I'll only be there for 10 minutes. And although I'd just left the high school, I got offered 4 jobs. Greenock Ropework, Acme, Hamilton Shipyard, apprentice draftsman. All was going to be there forever. Oh, the yards are going to be there forever. It was like that film, you know, the sliding doors thing, you know. You make some decisions, don't you, in your life? And boy, that was one.
For centuries, Greenock had revolved around the town's busy shipyards.
Before tech companies came, Greenock was almost synonymous with shipbuilding. I mean, there are streets in Greenock where every house could see the shipyards. The riveter's bedlam, the sound of metal upon metal, used to be the sound of Greenock.
I grew up right here in Greenock. When I was young, the docks were busy, lots of people had work, but it was hard work and it wasn't all that well paid work, a lot of it. IBM coming into the middle of that was something really quite new and quite different.
I'm Bob Penley, speaking to you from IBM's Field Systems Center in Poughkeepsie, where, beginning today, we'll be demonstrating this System 370 Model 155 to our customers.
When I was growing up, IBM, it sounded brand new, and it sounded like the future. You said IBM and immediately thought modernity. You saw the three letters, IBM, and there was a kind of Kubrick quality to it.
But when IBM Greenock was founded in the 1950s, computing was barely even a concept the man on the street might recognise. In 1968, that changed when Stanley Kubrick's classic movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey, was released. And the film's self-aware supercomputer, HAL 9000, introduced a generation to the dawning age of new technology.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information, so I am constantly occupied.
The IBM Corporation even advised on the film, consulting on future technologies as they created the villainous HAL.
IBM were happy to give whatever help they could with the production and design. HAL is the brain and the central nervous system of the ship Discovery. And it was only, a long time later during production that somebody pointed out that HAL are the three letters in the alphabet that precede IBM. You know, it's an epoch-making film. I think it's very difficult for anyone who was born after the release of 2001 in 1968 to appreciate the perception of computers in the 60s. Computers then were enormous things, taking the whole floor of a big building.
Suddenly, in the popular imagination, computers were the future.
I'd seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I'd left school the week before. I'd been a Saturday boy in Woolworths, and then I started in IBM the following Monday morning. Job was advertised as a computer operator. It was about 6 or 7 months later where you actually get your hands on a computer. Everybody was young. No one had any previous experience of this, so we're all brand new. It was a level playing field for everyone.
IBM would have to grow its Greenock workforce from the ground up. But the story of how the technology giant came to the Clyde coast begins, of course, in America.
IBM started out as the tabulating machine company in the United States in 1896. And then a man called Thomas Watson Sr. Became the managing director of it in 1911, and it then grew under his leadership phenomenally. Tom Watson originally was a cash register salesman by training, so this was always an ethos that absolutely permeated the firm. It was quite autocratic and driven, and in early 1920s it's changed its name to International Business Machines.
In those days, all IBM executives could assemble in a single room to map advertising strategy.
I can't come before a group of men in this business without my mind just automatically going back 23 years since I took charge of this business. At that time, we had 235 employees, And today we have more than 10,000 people.
IBM supplied new technologies for the corporate world. Its philosophy summed up in its single-word company slogan.
Think.
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 Which is still the company's watchword today. At the start of the 1950s, Watson was looking to expand his business worldwide. And that led him to a connection with Scotland.
The MP at the time was a chap called Hector McNeill. He went to Glasgow University, he was an engineer, and he also was Vice President of the United Nations Assembly. And that's where he met Thomas Watson. And they became very close, very friendly. Watson had remarked to Hector McNeill that he was looking for a place in Europe and he was thinking about the UK, and Hector McNeill, as any good local MP would do, says, well, I've got the very place for you, why don't you come over?
Hector McNeill took Tom Watson on a tour of his Greenock constituency.
The idea was to encourage Mr. Watson to open a plant in Scotland, bring some work to this area. So they got him up here, stayed in this very hotel. One of the sites they took him to was Cairns old shipyard. They drove in, and Watson said, no, out again, went to Knocknares Hill, and then they were coming back here for lunch.
Right,
and then as you go over the brow of the homes,
and then
the valley opens up and you're looking. Hey, slow the car down a wee bit, will you? He said, a good shifty at it. And he said, right, what's the name of the farm there? Spango Farm. Right, Spango Valley, the Valley of Opportunities. That's where we build the plant.
Remember at lunchtime, we used to walk down the stream.
Aye.
Oh, aye.
Right down the valley.
Race wee boats in it.
That's right.
I remember.
Aye.
Just outside the city, nestled in the picturesque Spango Valley, IBM's new plant is ready for dedication day, August 30th, 1954. Hector McNeill, Member of Parliament from Greenock, speaks to World Trade's president for the people of Greenock.
I hope, Dick, that you'll tell your father that here in the Spango Valley, he will not always have better employees than you would find anywhere else in Great Britain, but better friends than you'll find anywhere in the world.
Built to IBM specifications, the works, as they're called in Scotland, present American industry at its best, mass production efficiency, in a setting designed for individual cleanliness, comfort, and convenience.
I think what Watson wanted to do was capture the reputation that we had for engineering and for quality. That was the very ethos of the term Clyde Belt. It was considered a good place to work because just the differences in the industries. They moved from a building which was ancient and traditional to a new build which was spotlessly clean. The toilets were inside and things like that. It was a place that people sought to come to work.
But neither men who brought IBM to Greenock were to see the plant grow. Both Hector McNeill and Tom Watson died in the mid-1950s, Watson leaving IBM in the hands of his two sons. But by 1954, the Greenock plant was established.
It expanded greatly. On the back of that, I would suggest that other companies, big companies, good companies, came along and helped to grow effectively the Scottish electronics industry.
Borrowing from California's famous Silicon Valley, this cluster of electronics manufacturers became known as Silicon Glen.
Not since Brigadoon has there been a Scottish myth of place quite as potent as Silicon Glen.
Silicon Glen as a concept was wonderfully aligned to the future and the modern times.
Apart from ourselves at IBM, we had National Semiconductor, who were in Greenock, we had Compact.
Timex, Mimtech. There was people associated with the computer industry all over the Central Belt. So it was massive.
The growth of electronics manufacturing Both helped to replace the jobs that were being lost from disappearing heavy industries and opened up new opportunities for workers.
It definitely changed the people, you know. I mean, it certainly changed the town.
IBM came, all the housing developments in Greenock and all over the place, so IBM people bought them. People like me, none of my family ever owned their houses or anything like that. Working people didn't own their house.
The equipment being manufactured here in the Spango Valley plant is produced by machines and methods brought from America. But quitting time at Greenock is pretty much the same as quitting time anywhere in the world.
In Greenock, the US-owned company brought with it a new Americanized way of doing business.
You never called anyone Mr. Everyone just used their first names.
You called your manager Ronnie or whatever. I found that quite hard to get used to because I'd always been used to calling him Mr. Dunbar and Miss Buchanan in the shipyard. It was a good leveller, if you like.
Might have been a bit of snobbery in the area about those who work in IBM. A lot of people wore white shirts, ties, and they had a badge for identification. And that was possibly unheard of, certainly within the shipyards.
But it all lent itself to this image of that this is a really professional company, which, in fairness, it was.
The women who worked at IBM Greenock in its earliest decades also had to adhere to the house style.
When I started in 1969, the girls weren't allowed to wear trousers.
That's right.
But, I don't think really many people were that bothered about wearing trousers then, because the miniskirts were out and quite liked to wear miniskirts.
Mm-hmm.
Did you work in a lot of different departments, Val?
I did secretarial, so admin work. Clerical's too old-fashioned, I tell you, isn't it? Admin.
I know, we've all got fancy titles.
I know, financial claims analyst.
Yes, oh yes.
Of course, when you went into work in the canteen, oh, I'd never seen pots as big. They were huge.
Do you remember IBM had its own chauffeur?
That's right, because he picked me up from the airport and I thought it was awfully special.
But everybody used to say that. It was special if you worked in IBM. And you were just lucky you were in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. It did feel quite glamorous. Oh, we thought we were film stars.
There's always been a particularly vivid relationship, at least imaginatively, between the west coast of Scotland and America. We've always looked out there, ever since we were Waynes, some of us, and we know that Ireland's out there somewhere, but really what's out there is America. It's always a very kind of idealised America that we see from this coast. It's a very romantic relationship, so when industries started to come here from America, it almost felt like they were doing us a favour. They've chosen us. You know, it proved to be a much more complicated relationship as time went on.
You keep very quiet under the sea, but you can let off steam ashore.
But post-war, more Americans were also arriving on the Firth of Clyde.
Underneath my feet, there lies packed together more devastating explosive power than was used by all the belligerents in the Second World War.
In 1961, the US Navy opened its new Polaris nuclear submarine base at Holy Loch, directly across the Clyde from the IBM site.
They were strange presences in an old country, and they made the old country seem suddenly modern.
The new US base was a response to heightening Cold War tensions, but it attracted passionate protests.
Hoses can be a useful defense against boarders, like the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament supporters who attacked the ship by canoe last Easter.
For a period, we felt we were slightly taken over by America, that here was this vast, mass, exterminating power.
Although the IBM plant and the US nuclear defence base had no business connections, as nearby neighbours on the Firth, they served as a reminder of American power in the Cold War era and of the Clyde Coast's strange new place in that order. In the early years, the manufacturing lines at Spango turned out products like IBM's range of typewriters. But by the 1960s, Big Blue, as IBM became known, was also making computers, though not as we know them today.
It was quite a shock to find how old-fashioned the equipment we were using was. If you wanted something into a computer, it had to go into a punch card.
I was a key punch operator, or a punch girl, as we were known. We just keyed in information onto punch cards.
And they used copious amounts of punched cards in those days, millions every year.
Information from source documents, bills, receipts, orders, is converted to combinations of holes in a card.
In these days, computer data and programs, what we would call apps today, were stored not in the computer itself, but on these punched cards, literally pieces of cardboard that fed the computer information. The IBM 1130 was a punched card system designed for scientific use and introduced in 1965.
First machine I ever worked on was the 1130. It was cumbersome. It was not the sort of thing that you lifted and took with you out the door at night time.
1130 was what they called a scientific computer. It wasn't sold in general, it was universities all over the world.
And also, that was the first use of, one of the first use of the golf ball printer. Literally, it was about the size of a golf ball, and it would rotate and print. Dunk, dunk, dunk.
At the National Museum of Computing, in Bletchley near Milton Keynes, volunteer Peter Vaughan works on restoring and maintaining vintage computer systems.
I've always been fascinated with technology, with computers. I'm a software developer by trade. I've often gone to museums and sort of seen static displays, you know. And so one of the important aspects of this museum is that we have a lot of working machines. Noise and smells, you know, that's what does it for me, really.
Peter led a 5-year project to restore a rare 1968 IBM 1130 to working order. Large machines like these were usually rented from the company, but the 1130 was a snip in its day at a mere $32,000 US if bought outright.
I'm going to load a program. Normal process is to load the cards into the hopper, and the card should then start loading. This was manufactured in Greenock. We know that because there is actually a tag on the back with a serial number with the correct identifier for Greenock. It's actually only recently we found out what this machine was actually used for. And apparently it was used for analysing information from CERN to deal with the tracking of particles.
Founded in 1954, CERN is the European Laboratory for Particle Physics, the cutting-edge research facility near Geneva, where today scientists use the largest and most complex technology on Earth to unlock the secrets of the smallest things in the universe, subatomic particles.
CERN is really trying to find out what's inside the atom. So what they do is to conduct experiments with high-speed nuclear particles, and that generates huge quantities of data.
CERN does some of the most advanced science in the world, and the IBM 1130 from the Greenock plant helped them do it.
So that's quite an amazing, application for this particular machine to be actively used, for particle physics was quite an amazing thing to find out. And it's been a fascinating journey.
From inside the atom to outer space, In the 1960s, technology was opening up extraordinary new frontiers. Then, in 1969, some Americans took a trip.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And man's adventures in space needed computers to collect instrument data and to aid in flight control.
IBM was involved in the various space missions with NASA. What they were involved was the overall information systems.
Space exploration is expanding the universe, with ground computers linked with those in the spaceship to bring about pinpoint landings.
If you think of the ground station, where there's people all sitting at terminals and cheering when a module has landed, then that was mostly IBM kit, and that controlled the whole mission.
By the following year, IBM had expanded into 108 countries globally. And at the Greenock plant, staff were part of that vast worldwide operation and had to keep up with the increasing pace of change.
It was quite common in IBM for people to change jobs. If you saw something you fancied, you went for it.
Whatever job you wanted to do, then the company helped try and get you to that stage.
The idea that you could move about like that was seen by many as a good opportunity to try something new.
IBM's enthusiasm for moving employees into new roles led some to joke that the company initials really stood for "I've been moved."
I was there 38 years and I've probably in 15 maybe jobs or something.
They didn't just let you vegetate. They trained you.
Taught you how to present things, how to be a project manager. They trained everybody to the nth degree.
Bobby Stevenson started work on the factory floor in 1977.
IBM were looking for people that didn't know they could program. So they opened it to everybody in the plant. There were 3,000 people. They gave you 3 hours, and for 3 hours you sat there with numbers and letters and small mathematical problems. And then at the end of it I thought, because I remembered a hangover when I was doing it, and I thought, well, that was fun. They went, you know you can program. And I went, no. That was a total surprise. And they took 10 hours away for a year to teach us software. And I'm still doing that programming since 30 years ago.
Bobby is a second-generation IBMer. His father, Tom, was IBM Greenock's 49th employee, joining in 1952.
He started just after he left school. My grandfather bought him a white shirt and said, you're going for an interview with this new American company, and he got the job. And travelling was just considered part of the job. It didn't matter what you did. Folks started getting really good lives. We moved to France and then New York. And even when I was a student at Glasgow, I used to take my dirty washing over to America to get done. It was just accepted. I mean, Atlantic was nothing. Sometimes the whole manufacturing line would be sent to Raleigh, North Carolina to learn the product and then bring it back. And folk would just, oh, where are you going next week? Oh, I'm away to North Carolina. It was like, I'm away to Paisley.
It was quite common for people to get a call and say, we need you. And you just had to go.
So I got some lovely trips out to Japan, out to Taiwan. I've been to America.
You know, the Nordics and Germany, France, Spain.
China, Uzbekistan.
Oh, South Africa was just brilliant. I had wife, 3 kids, 2 dogs and 3 cats came with me.
And that was something that IBM did. If you went for a certain length of time, your family went with you.
Oh, it was exciting. It was just another world. It was just you were in first class, I mean. My very first trip to America was to a place called Rochester in Minnesota, and it was like -40 and all. You know, you were freezing, you're instant frozen. You couldn't breathe in deep. It was that kind of, no, this is a boy from Greenock, never been to anywhere, you know.
January, I think it was 25, 2011, I think. There was a revolution, an uprising in Cairo.
David Brooks started out working on the Greenock production lines, but rose to international management roles, running a new IBM centre in Egypt.
I saw Egyptian fighter jets flying below my apartment, and there's gunfire, looting. I just made sure all the people were safe. People were coming to work with sleeping bags and cases of food to stay in the IBM building. And you learn a lot about yourself. So there's no IBM training manual, the how to handle when a country's switched off the internet and you can't communicate. So no, you would never in your wildest dreams. You start off working as a flow solder operator to be in Cairo, you see the pyramids and be in the middle of a revolution.
The third generation of computers was upon us. On April 7th, 1964, Tom Watson introduced the System 360 at Poughkeepsie. He stressed that it was the most important product announcement in company history.
In the mid-1960s, the computer industry had a problem. Big businesses wanted to upgrade their technology, but it was costly and time-consuming because each machine ran its own unique software.
So the 1960 was called the decade of the software crisis. And the problem was that software had proved very difficult to develop. This came as a complete surprise to the computer industry. Programs often cost as much as a computer to develop and would take, perhaps a year to write.
IBM's solution was the System 360, a new family of products designed to be software compatible. For the first time, customers could seamlessly expand their computing power. The 360 system could be used for a huge variety of tasks, in business, commonly in areas like banking.
One computer family, compatibility between second-generation programs and third-generation technology.
The investment that it made in System 360 was absolutely enormous. It was about $5 billion, and they said it was the largest research project outside developing the atomic bomb. The biggest one could have been up to about £1 million, so there's a huge range of capability.
These looked like real computers. It was a showpiece for the factory. One wall was completely glass. People would be showing past this as how high-tech IBM were.
In Mad Men, they actually purchased an IBM 360 and they put it in a glass cube in the middle of their office as a sort of a showpiece computer because they were incredibly expensive.
Get out while you can!
Right down. The 60s set drama portrayed both the ambivalence some felt about the coming of the computer age, but also the excitement about what these new machines could actually do.
Well, I was at IBM for a few years, and I saw that they have got a great product. They don't trust it. I've worked with these machines. I know how resilient they are. I don't want to find them in a junkyard in 2 years.
Vintage computer enthusiast Adam Bradley recently acquired a historically valuable but long abandoned 1960s System 360.
So here we have the IBM 360 central processing unit. This is the heart of the mainframe. To my right now, we have the multifunction card machine, a punch, interpreter, reader, and sorter. Here we have a 29 series punch system, which is used for manual data input onto cards. Over here we have a double-deck 2415 Mark II tape drive. We have a 2311 disk drive, 2501 punch card reader, and just over here we have a system printer. So in the central processing unit, we can see that the serial number of this particular frame begins 55. Now 55 means this was manufactured by IBM Greenock. So, we were in a pub on a Monday night, and as you would do, we were browsing German eBay. We came across a system, and my friend said to me, "Adam, is that an IBM 360? I said, "I think it is." So I thought, I really have to have that. So we started bidding on it. And the following morning, we continued bidding on it, and we won. And we thought, okay, well, where is this machine? And we thought, it's in Nuremberg. The realization of reality suddenly set in that we now had to move this piece of equipment from Germany to the UK. And it weighs 9 tons.
With the machine now safely in the UK, Adam plans to restore it to working order.
It's going to be an enormous job. We have no idea of its condition. The disk drives have hydraulic heads, and three-phase motors. So it's getting all that working again. It's an enormous undertaking. I think it'll probably be around a decade before the machine's fully operational again. I feel passionate about it, displaying these systems to the public, so people actually understand the evolution of where we've come from, because it is the second industrial revolution.
The success of the 360 has surpassed all expectations.
Computers had finally moved into the modern workplace.
Famous saying was that nobody ever got sacked for buying IBM.
If you wanted a computer, it had to be IBM, Big Blue. The letters IBM meant something. It had a cachet about it.
But by the late 1970s, some individuals were starting to grapple with the potential of new technologies.
Here's Johnny.
And opening the door to new computerized ways of working, film director Stanley Kubrick bought an IBM Series 1 for use on his production, The Shining.
The Series 1 proved very useful on The Shining. It cost about £16,000, which in '78 was a pretty sizable amount of dosh. I think that was the first computer used in production in the British film industry.
Kubrick's plan was to use the Series 1 to develop a computer program to handle accountancy on the film.
But of course, in those days, there was no off-the-shelf software. So he then had to engage a company in London, and I think it took 3 guys 6 months or something to write. It was very curious, the attitude to the rest of the film industry. You guys obviously don't know what to spend your money on. You know, what's this going to do? It's not going to make you a cup of coffee or anything. And then Shining was finished. So what happens to it? We hire it out to the Barbara Streisand film, Yentl. And savvy Stanley had paid for itself.
In 2016, it was revealed that part of the US nuclear ballistic missile system was still controlled by another 1970s IBM Series 1.
Listen, I mean, it's not going to help either one of us if the doomsday machine goes off now, is it? Dimitri, there's no point in you getting hysterical at a moment like this. Dimitri.
It's amazing to think how single companies can actually change people's expectations. IBM is a prime example because you would have thought it impossible that a company with a non-unionized culture like that could have come into a place like Greenock and been accepted. But not only were they accepted, but they almost cleaned the slate.
IBM are not anti-union, they insist. It's just that their employees don't require what they call third-party representation.
Everybody was from a union background, you know. I mean, you think we were all shipyard people. Heavy demarcation, don't do anybody else's job.
And in comes IBM, this pristine, you know, modern-faced company who didn't believe in unions. You were paid what they told you would be paid. You would work the hours that they told you would work. There was no room for negotiation. And that wasn't just a shock. It absolutely revolutionised the local culture.
Well, the IBM position on unions was that you could be a member of a trade union, but the company didn't negotiate with trade unions. They negotiated with people on an individual basis.
You had what they called the open door policy. You could take it up to the next level. So that was their equivalent. And it seemed to work.
We had an ACAS inquiry, and I think it was something like 96% of the IBM population decided that they didn't want to join a union.
104. Hang on a second, I'll just check. Are we running?
But as the plant grew, the workforce changed in some important ways too.
When I started in IBM, it was very male-orientated. It was mainly engineering-type roles or traditional roles that males would be in. We didn't have a lot of female role models that had made senior positions in IBM.
My first job, I worked building legs for one of the stand-up computers. My first day, when the manager came to gate the person that was starting on the line that day, he was expecting a male And there I was, 4'10.5". I mean, only one man ever said that I was doing a man out of a job and I should have had a job in a shoe shop, but...
As a secretary, I knew I could only go so far, so I decided to move into a clerical role in site services, and eventually I became a systems analyst there. I was working with joiners and electricians and people who were building the buildings around here. And I remember when I went down, I turned the computer on and they were like, wow, that wee girl knows how to work the computer.
When I started in the tech support lab, I was the only woman working in the technical role in the lab. There weren't many females getting into engineering and technology at that time.
When I said I was having a baby, they really didn't believe I was coming back. I knew I was coming back because my career had been my first baby, and I didn't see why I couldn't have both.
Roles for women were changing fast, and in the 1960s and 70s, new IBM products were playing their part in transforming workplace culture.
Behold the future. I'm talking money, hand over fist. A typewriter. A self-correcting IBM Selectric 2 electric typewriter with patented high-speed type ball. They're not just for women anymore.
It's almost unthinkable today, but in the mid-20th century office, information could only be stored on sheets of paper, mainly composed by secretaries on typewriters.
So the problem with a conventional typewriter was that how would you prepare a document? Typically what people would do would be they'd dictate it, it would then go to a typing pool and get typed, and then they would have to edit it. Then it would all have to be retyped.
IBM's MT72 changed all that when it introduced the concept of word processing.
It had a storage unit attached to a Selectric typewriter, so that now you could perform all those editing operations actually on the typewriter, but inside the memory unit it had stored all the keystrokes, and a computer program would then reformat it and you could type off a clean copy.
Corrections are finished and it's all ready for typing automatically.
Using a word processor required quite a lot of training, but typists were very trained individuals, so it wasn't a particularly huge challenge for them.
I saw this advertisement to go and work for, it said, a prominent person in his home and da-da-da. So then they said, well, I suppose you'd like to know who you'd be working for. So I said, oh, well, it would help, you know. And and they said Len Dayton.
The acclaimed writer Len Dayton shot to best-selling fame in the 1960s. Secretary Eleanor Handley worked with Dayton on his blockbuster book, Bomber. It's thought to be the very first novel ever composed on a word processor.
He was just great to work with. He was very, very keen on machinery, and I found it fascinating because of his enthusiasm. And IBM actually approached him, told him about the MT72, and Len decided to have it. It was like a small upright piano. It wasn't just one piece of equipment. There was the keyboard part, and then there was the computer part that had all the magnetic tapes which ran on it and so on. And to get it into the house, they had to take all the front windows out, and it had to be brought up on a crane, and so it was, yeah, quite a beast. I used to try and beat it. If I could type faster than it could print it out. But I think I did. It was a very complex, big book. It's the most amazing thing to work on, and you know, I really lived it. Every page, every time I typed it. But I didn't realise just quite how revolutionary it was. Oh, I feel very, very proud of being part of Bomber, and quite privileged, really. You know, I worked on it, and the fact that it has become part of history.
Rolling off the production line of the world's biggest computer manufacturer is a complete new range of microcomputers for the individual user and the small to medium-sized business. Needless to say, the family is very proud of its latest offspring.
By the mid-1980s, IBM had come to lead not only the new technology industry, but international business as a whole.
Dominates the business market, and its market valuation is larger than any other company in the world, a staggering $80,000 million.
What got IBM there was one blockbuster machine, the IBM PC.
Well, it was something new. Everybody was interested in it and wanted to know how they could get one.
It was brand new, IBM Greenock being the pioneer of the PC. It was something right at the birth.
This was the rise of home computing, the very first time we had digital devices in our everyday lives. The IBM PC was a global bestseller that rewrote the popular idea of what a computer was. But the team at Spango plotted a revolution of their own when they hatched a plan to steal a place for the Greenock plant in the worldwide PC boom.
IBM's initial plans were to manufacture the personal computer in America for the entire world. Jim Miller, who was the site director at the time, felt that there was an opportunity for us. So he put a small team together. We got a hold of an IBM PC from America and we broke it down. And we decided that we would price the components and source components locally or within Europe and see what we could manufacture a Greenock-made IBM PC for in terms of cost.
Oh, at that time, I mean, every plant in Europe wanted that. It was a competitive thing.
It was something that was always really good about people from this area. They always come up with ways of how can we get out there and be a bit ahead of everybody else.
We can do this. We can do this cheaper. We can do it better.
Persuading the US head office that the lucrative PC should be made in Greenock would be no mean feat. But the Scottish team were only able to try because of the way IBM US had designed their PC.
They outsourced all the components. So, for example, the microprocessor chip came from a firm called Intel. The parts were assembled and then they produced the machine and it became the IBM PC.
Because the IBM PC was built from off-the-shelf parts, other computer manufacturers began to do the same as the Greenock IBM team and build clones of the popular device.
Reverse engineer an IBM PC with me. Why? What would be the point? Because I want to build a machine that nobody else has the balls to build.
The US TV drama Halt and Catch Fire portrayed a fictional Texan tech company trying to build an IBM clone.
A personal computer, like any other computer, is just a nothing box full of electronic switches and hardware. Anyone can buy all this stuff off the shelf right now.
We then had a board meeting coming over, and at that board meeting we presented the Greenock-made IBM PC, and on the back of that, the IBM PC came here.
Greenock had created their own IBM PC, and from within the company.
Yeah, you could say it was an inside job. I guess it would have been like winning an order in the shipyards for a new ship. So it was like, oh, here we go.
Being on the start of the journey, it was really exciting.
So that was a huge, huge moment for Greenock to get these products, and it sustained Greenock for a great many number of years after that.
Greenock's PC was soon rolling out of the factory, shipping to customers throughout Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. As the new PC moved into homes and offices around the country, it began to change our relationship with technology. Stanley Kubrick was again at the vanguard of the new IBM tech.
The trouble with the IBM manual is that if you want something specific to look up, it's very good, but it's very hard to sit down and read the whole IBM manual.
Stanley had been reading about the IBM PCs. This was the green screen. It didn't have a hard drive, but it had two 5 1/4 floppies. And I remember saying to Stanley, I really don't want this. I think he got a bit exasperated. And in the end he said, listen, you've got to learn to use this machine. If you don't want to learn, look for another job, which concentrated my mind wonderfully.
But the new PCs were greeted by many enthusiastic early adopters. Anthony's son, Nick, also worked with Stanley Kubrick.
My first and earliest memories of working with Stanley was just hanging out with Dad when he went to work in my holidays. I used to play on the sets of various films, and then I met Stanley, and we kind of hit it off. We had a keen interest in computing, which was obviously in its infancy as far as the public went at the time. And Stanley was very visionary when it came to using computers, and he would lend me things to go and play with, which was amazing at the time, and just say, go and learn it.
Do you know anybody here who's keen and who either would know who to get or would be helpful themselves?
My computer teacher at school didn't believe me. My friends had Spectrums at the time, and I was playing with IBMs. It was really an amazing experience. And so Stanley was keen to use anything he could get from me as far as technical knowledge. It's a great work ethic to learn when you're 12 as well.
Stanley embraced the future. He wasn't afraid of it, dragging the rest of us Luddites behind him.
You think the machines felt this way?
You
think from building machines like that to building personal computers this size, which we used to think were the bee's knees, we went that it's got 20 kilobytes in it and that kind of stuff. They talk about gigabytes and megabytes.
I've got more than that in my watch.
The IBM PC had propelled the company's global business to new heights.
Probably its most successful time would have been mid-1980s. It had a workforce of about 400,000.
But as the decade progressed, it became clear that all was not as it seemed.
It all turned out to be slightly a double-edged sword for IBM because it actually became quite easy to make a clone machine. And so you got firms like Dell Computer and Compaq, who were very quickly selling as many personal computers as IBM was, probably at a lower price.
It was a bit more of a precarious business to be in.
Squeezed in the PC market by smaller companies selling clones, IBM was also threatened in its traditional area of large mainframes for business.
The old ways had gone. Nobody rented big machines that filled a room anymore. So the game was lost.
By 1993, it became famous as having made the largest corporate loss in history, so it was an absolute existential crisis.
When did it start to go downhill?
Well, it's just maybe we were getting paid too much, so they ended up subcontract. Somebody else can do your job cheaper.
Eastern markets were cheaper, and that's why they went there.
Went away. But how did it take us as Greenock boys and turn us into that?
It turned hammer and chisel engineers into precision engineers.
The pace of change in digital technology is ever increasing, ever accelerating. So the lifespan of any phase of it gets shorter and shorter.
We were constantly looking at how can we save a penny off of a component or a minute off of a process. We could never be fast enough or good enough because everything was happening so fast, everything was changing so fast.
At the end, we were no longer a low-cost economy, and unfortunately, that's the way business goes.
As manufacturing at the Greenock plant began to dwindle, the corporation as a whole was turning towards software and IT services as new priorities. This international call centre was the last building built at Spango Valley in the 1990s.
We had people from all over Europe come and join us. A lot of them were in their early 20s, 2 or 3 degrees, 3 or 4 languages. The cafeteria started selling cappuccinos and baguettes, and you see people kissing in the corridor, The traditional Greenock people would be like, can't do that.
The call centre thrived for a time, but the long-term trend was set. By 2005, IBM had sold its PC manufacturing business to Chinese company Lenovo.
What is it for a place to get its identity from the work that people have in common? And what happens to that place when that one industry vanishes?
Few today think the Silicon Glen days of mass manufacturing are likely to return. In the first 15 years of this century, Scotland's electronics exports fell by 75%.
It's sad that because as you're growing, you drag along, you know, other companies, you know, to grow with you. And then as you die away, then, you know, it's a knock-on effect.
And it is sad. And it's sad to see the shipyards go as well. But you've got to move on.
Though manufacturing here has ended, IBM still operates a building in Greenock, looking out to the Firth. Globally, IBM's shift in business strategy paid off. It is now the 6th largest technology company in the world. But in Inverclyde, the company's real legacy is in its IBMers.
One of the reasons that IBM came here was to try to capture the kind of the Clyde built mindset, and they managed to do that.
The thing that IBM did was it transformed whole family lives. I mean, it embraced the fact that its workforce were important and were to be valued.
I really never wanted to go anywhere apart from the west of Scotland, and working at IBM let me have a really nice career and stay where I wanted to live.
I really did enjoy it. I'd go as far as to say I loved it.
It would have been a different town had it not come. And it had a good name, IBM. You knew what you were standing for. God, that sounds as if I've been brainwashed. Probably have.
In the last 70 years, new technology has changed the world and Scottish lives more than anyone could have predicted.
It's almost impossible to imagine how much further it could progress, but who knows what we'll be talking about in another 10, 20 years' time.
Who knows, maybe some other Scottish guy will, you know, create something, you know.
If you're a fan of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they have an invention there called the Babel fish. And it's a fish you can pop into your ear and it enables you to understand different languages.
I'd like to invent an empathy machine that could connect us on a personal level and allow us to understand each other a little bit more.
Do you know what would be good? See a mirror that actually showed your face the right way around. That would be quite interesting.
If you could time travel, right, that would be the thing for me.
I always say to people, they're going to invent a chip to put in a dog's head that can translate what dogs are thinking, and your dog will talk to you. I've not got a dog.